Hello, my name is Jorge Bañuelos. I'm a second-year PhD student in Yale's Department of Religious Studies in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. Likewise, I have the pleasure of being this year's graduate coordinator for Yale's Center for the Study of Race, Indigeneity, and Transnational Migration. As a matter of fact, the Rhythm Sitter is what connected us. Wadada Leo Smith is a fall 2022 Mellon Arts and Practitioner Fellow with the Center. And I'm very pleased to introduce him. I mean, we're sitting here with a living legend. I can't overstate, we're here with a truly prolific avant-garde musician who I have the honor and privilege of speaking with. Smith is a composer, multi-instrumentalist, and an arranger. Residencies, you've had residencies at the New School, Georgetown, for example. You were on the faculty for Cal Arts, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and you were there for about 20 or so years?
22.
Honorary doctorate, and then also faculty emeritus as well.
Yes.
And then also started your own record label.
Yeah.
I think by my count, over about 50 albums?
I got over 100.
Woo.
Actually.
So my count was off. And then likewise, finalist for the 2013 Pulitzer Prize in Music. Mm-hmm. Also 2016 recipient of the Doris Duke Award. Mm-hmm. Wow. Man, so I guess I'll just start by way of an anecdote. So I first had the privilege of meeting with Dada. Earlier in the fall, you gave a lecture at Timothy Dwight College on campus. Speaking beforehand on the lecture, I was supposed to run the clicker. I said, man, don't worry about it. We'll just improvise. It's jazz. He recoiled. Yeah. Would you mind telling us, in a sense, why the words jazz and improvisation are not words that are in your lexicon?
Well, essentially, they was not intended for music. Mm-hmm. And those terms was actually forced upon African American artistic community as a term that defined what they did. Mm-hmm. One of the traditions that humans practice all over the world, and it's rare to be denied it, is a naming process. Mm-hmm. Humans name their location, their siblings, their notion of what they do in life. All kinds of naming processes go on. So when the people looked at the music coming out of early New Orleans, which is actually the southern cradle of this music, mm-hmm. they tagged it as jazz, and that it had improvisation in it and all that kind of stuff. Well, improvisation entered the lexicon about 300 and something BC, mm-hmm. you see. And it was dealing with theater, had nothing to do with music, okay? And the word jazz come from a baseball term, mm-hmm. where they try to explain the kind of energy used in the participation of that ball game.
Yeah.
And so why would you call a music jazz, or why would you employ the word improvisation when they have no meaning whatsoever to that music? Secondly, if you look at the definition, improvisation means virtually nothing. It's a collection of words that you can't even get a clear meaning out of. Mm-hmm. You see, to do something offhandedly, that don't mean nothing. Mm-hmm. So I reject anything that's forced upon me or anything that's forced upon the people that I'm associated with. Mm-hmm. And that's the clearest way I can define it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up on that. So I gave an introduction, mm-hmm. but it's always more special when someone tells us in their own words who they are. So would you mind introducing yourself and telling me who you are and how you narrate yourself?
Well, I'm a human being. Mm-hmm. My existence on the planet has something to do with my character of making art and making art in the present. Mm-hmm. I'm a family person. I love family because that's the basic unit of humanity. And I like thinking and deep reflecting about stuff. Prizes and ceremonies and things like that are very important, but they have very little practical use, mm-hmm. other than the fact that somebody gives you something or they something. But the whole point is that I think of myself as a creative person who is constantly looking and striving to discover not just who I am, but to discover a larger picture of what this human experience can be. You see, so that's that's how I would describe myself.
Mm-hmm. Something along the lines of the blues and the abstract truth.
Well,
a little bit.
it could be a way of thinking
Yeah.
about it, but see, even the notion of the blues actually distorts what one would be, because blues is a cultural notion about a society. It's a psychological way of presenting information into the society, larger part of the society. When we think about blues, we always think about this notion of 12 bars or somebody singing about something sad. Well, that ain't none of that's true. You see, John Lee Hooker, for example, he doesn't observe no 12-bar frame for the blues. He plays as long as he wants on any one of those supposedly chords that are associated with the blues. And he changes whenever he wants to. But even that's superficial because that has no real true meaning. That is, that he doesn't observe this formalized form that people have grown accustomed to that they identify with blues. So what I'm trying to tell you is that blues has several categories, like, for example, Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson gives a exposition on a piece that's called, I forget the title of the piece, but the lyrics go like this. When I die, you can bury my old body beside the highway. So when the Greyhound bus come along, I can get up and take a ride. Now, that seemed like a nice kind of a collection of words, but that's deep meaning in that. It says the same thing that any philosopher from Nietzsche to Pythagoras to whoever, it says the same thing about that life, that one survives death. Because if his old body that's buried beside the highway can get up and take a ride on the Greyhound bus, which is a physical characteristics of traveling, it means that life or that consciousness of that person survives death. But he says it within the limits of 2.5 minutes. Not a book that has 500 pages or 1,000 pages in it that goes ramblers on and on and on and on and on. It's one of the most succinct definitions about this idea of consciousness surpassing death. So that's one quality. John Lee Hooker has a blues that's called Tupelo Flood. That's one we just got to talk about. That's a philosophical blues. And the other one, the Tupelo Flood, he talks about is an actual event that happened. So it's a historical blues. And you can go on and identify all the way down the line all these characteristics that are associated with the blues, where in fact the person that's truly receiving this information would glean those kinds of qualities that I'm talking about it, and not the fact that it has 12 bars or 32 bars or 19 bars or 1.5 bars long, or that it has these old kinds of sadness or some. You see, all that stuff is dust, but the real human is supposed to look through dust. You see, because the dust settles after a while. Gravity takes care of that.
Man, there are a couple ideas. There are a lot of ideas in what you just said. I think there's one of them I do want to hop onto about the existential quality of it. That, in a sense, because to me, I'm a musician as well. Part of, to me, what the appeal of being someone who makes music, but then also deeply appreciates the art form, is the kind of immediate arrest you can get out of it. That, and what you're saying about that blues, that blues line that you mentioned, that there's kind of like an immediate haptic quality to it, like it reaches out and kind of grabs you or touches you. Is that related to inspiration?
That's a form of being, say, how can you say it, informed. It's more like an informed notion where you actually are able to capture the information that's hidden in a line, in a poetic line, you see. And then secondly, that kind of activity is called you discover, you're digging underneath the lyrics to find the truth of what's being spoken about, you see. So yeah, you could say that it does inspire you, to look deeper each time for something. But the notion of inspiration that we normally talk about and associate with art has to do with this idea that new information is received, and it's received, if you're a creative musician, it's received in the present moment while the activity of making that art piece is happening. So the ensemble is playing and somebody's in the ensemble gets inspired. And that inspiration is new information that's put into the pool. And that delivers something different than something that's formalized and just practiced and delivered as what it is. And I don't mean to say that a piece that's all written cannot carry inspiration. It can. Okay. Many artists, Duke Ellington included, have pieces that are completely written out. Okay, and they are also have come from inspiration and have this triggering quality when it's performed to inspire or be a source of inspiration for the performer. Same thing could be said about a composer like, let's use an old guy like Bach or Beethoven. Their music is all written out. Okay, but that music came from inspiration, and it also, the performer that's performing can reach a level of creativity where it also, to perform it in that certain way, they have to also receive inspiration how to do it.
Receive inspiration. So like not necessarily generate or come up with your own, but it seems like the inspiration is coming from somewhere else.
Yes.
Do you have a like? Could you put words in a sense to what inspiration is and where it might come from, and where does your inspiration come from?
Well, all inspiration comes from the same place, and it's unknown. It's called the unknown or the unseen, and the idea of inspiration means to be inspired or to be input. Something is input. And to describe it, it's like a stream that flows through you only for a few moments. You can't even calculate it in terms of seconds. It's a few moments. It flows through you. And once it passes through you, it leaves this imprint there. And what's imprinted there is just for that moment. And if it's used in a performance of any kind, whether it be dancing, painting, writing, thinking, or whatever, it flows right through, and it comes out for that moment. You see, but that moment is like a spark in a world that's completely dark. That spark lasts forever because what was created from it is going to be part of the human dimension forever, both in terms of actuality as a work of art or as a memory. Those things are going to constantly be reincarnated or reinvented through the population of those that experience it. So the seed is this big from the moment of actual expression. It gets larger and larger and larger. And if somebody writes about it, that's another source where it's actually being spread out, you see. So it actually has something that it gives, both in a physical sense and also a mental sense, where it actually continuously to live. And I may remind you that nothing that's in creation is here and did not just not come into creation. It was always here. And that which is here can never leave. I'm paraphrasing basically the law of thermodynamics. You say it can never leave. Spiritual texts state the same thing in a different way, but it never leaves. You say, yeah.
So in a sense, it kind of sounds like there's a absolute or an eternal, and then a contraction of that. into the world that we live in. And then, if we orient ourselves, if we practice for it, we might be lucky enough to become a medium for it to continue and move forward.
Yeah. The practice of it is a quite simple thing. That is, one have to be desired and in need and in search of it. And then when it does happen, one needs to be capable of using it. You see, everybody's inspired. Most people don't know what inspiration means. They don't know what it feels like inside of themselves. Mostly people who perform artistic works recognize it more than ordinary people. And that's because they are constantly searching and striving to discover something. You see, ordinary people have these same kinds of inspiration. It comes into them the same way, but they don't pay attention to it often. They call it like daydreaming or fantasy or some vague idea or something, and they don't act on it. They just keep moving past it. But it comes through everybody, because if a person is being actually inspired and you're standing close to them, some of that wave hits you as well. Okay. Yeah.
So, in relation to, because you're multi-instrumentalist, and I assume that you still practice down to these days.
Yeah, I still practice. I won't say how much, but I still practice.
Yeah, because I'm also asking too, because for myself, I'm a drummer. I've noticed that practicing nowadays has moved a lot towards technique and also making sure that when inspiration comes, I'm actually kind of ready for the idea to manifest in that moment. In a sense, how do you practice? Like how do you teach practicing, and then how do you personally approach it?
Yeah, actually practicing part a little bit later, but let me say this. Let me talk about technique. We've been taught that technique is something that's taught to you. That's not quite true. Technique is the way that you do something. Every time you go out of your house and unlock the door, or come in and lock the door, that's a practical way that you get into your doorway. That's a technique. That's how you do it. Same thing with the way in which you do your research. You see, or how you take a walk. All these things are ways and means towards something. And when we talk about artistic technique, it always implies that it had been established and endorsed by some kind of a teacher or something. And what I'm trying to say is that technique is actually the way that you do something, how you do it, and the skill with which you are able to do it with. You see, so how do you gain that technique? You gain that technique by allowing yourself to be deeply aware of what you're doing and to take note of it mentally or otherwise of how one does it or how it's done, you see. And that began to be part of your kit of which you work through and work with. Okay. Practicing, a lot of people practice from, how their teacher taught them to practice. A lot of people practice from how you think about practice should be. I say find out how you learn how to practice by practicing. And the way to do that is not to fix anything about what it is, how you practice. For drummers, there's a different set of things that you practice. For wind instruments, there are a different set of things. Same thing for strings and so on. Okay. For drumming, everybody wants to be impressive. So they practice stuff that will make them appear to be impressive. That everybody can say, "Wow, that's that." No, there are drummers out there that play with what appears to be no trained technique whatsoever. And of course, they make the largest impact in the world. There are drummers who were extremely trained, but are able to overpass their training and actually do something that's absolutely phenomenal. Mm-hmm. That's a Tony Williams, for example. The early drum I was thinking about was we call him Big Chief. I'm trying to think of his name. He played with Abbott Allen and those people. Sonny Murray. Sonny Murray plays the drums like nobody you've ever heard before. Okay, and his impact is tremendous. Mm-hmm. It's tremendous. Okay, I mean like the difference between him. He's a new set of Baby Dodd, as Baby Dodd was in the 20s to everybody else. Mm-hmm. You see? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's the distinction. So what I'm telling you this is that if one is in a school, you got to find a way to discover that real part of what you're doing and why you're there. Mm-hmm. And if you're not in a school, you still got to find the real part of what you're doing and why you're there. That is why you're in creation. Mm-hmm. And once you discover even a part of that, you come close to where you're at. Mm-hmm. That means you come close to realizing your own state. Mm-hmm. You say, and what is that own state? That's a true state. I mean, it's called getting back to your original self. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah.
Reminds me of this quote by Ralph Ellison, the author of Invisible Man. One of my favorite quotes, where he says, "Good fiction is made up of reality. And reality is hard to come by."
Yeah. Well, it's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it also sounds like too in the style of practice or technique, practice. You know, just performing, getting the ideas out. That also it's training consciousness in a sense too. That you become aware of technique. You become aware of some things that you do that kind of seem as if they're just floating in the background. Mm-hmm. So, like for example, when drummers, they tell you practice with a metronome. Mm-hmm. You're not getting it, slow the metronome down. Mm-hmm. Moving slower gives you more of an opportunity to kind of hear the fine grains of where certain beats are laid out. Mm-hmm. But it's also training the mind in a sense to be able to hear, to perceive, to have better, more accurate perception. Mm-hmm. And it sounds also in a sense that to be able to perceive what is really real.
Yeah, that's one way. Mm-hmm. The other way is to just feel it. Because a stroke, once you make a stroke, it's already has set up something. Mm-hmm. And what comes after that, something comes after that, and the feeling tells you, it nudges you to stroke again in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And if it tells you to stroke more than one time, and all these things are they're almost faster than reasoning or logic. Mm-hmm. So you're working from your intuitive self, that's stroking. And that becomes that's a far more powerful key than a metronome. Mm-hmm. Because just you got to remember, Baby Dodd, they didn't have no metronomes. You know,
right,
they didn't. Mm-hmm. You say, what they understood is that if you initiate something, that's the beginning, and that beginning opens up all kinds of other possibilities. Mm-hmm. And that other possibility, if he's drumming or she's drumming, it's the notion of how it feels that the next stroke comes in. Mm-hmm. And like I say, this stuff is faster than lightning. You don't have to sit there and tabulate it and add it up. It's already, it done gone 50,000 strokes away from that adding up and tabulation of it. Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, metronome can be a by-source, you know, but also what overrides the metronome is your feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because then going back to the idea you were talking about with some drummers or musicians in general, who don't necessarily adhere to a school or its style, or who are not trying to have that kind of discipline, at least to be disciplined by something or someone beyond themselves, but it's a matter of groove. Pocket, does it feel good? Is it hitting how it should?
Well, don't call it groove, just call it feeling, because groove implies some historical reference to a beat, and it's not about a beat, because a beat is about a count, and it's not about a count. That's what I'm saying. It's about feeling. It's more about feeling. I mean, a guy like a Max Roach, they cannot throw out those unusual accents that's a 34th on the end of a set of figures. They can't throw it out if they're trying to count. It can only be done by feeling. You see, and then when people try to tabulate, they would need a machine to tabulate it. You see, the reason why is because the count, which is always about metrics, that's not in. You see, there are other kinds of rhythms out there. My music explores those as well, but they're called proportional. They're not based off a metrical cycle. Metrical cycle has either 12 strokes in it divided, or 4 strokes in it divided, or 2 strokes in it divided. That's all metrics, and there's a limit to it. If you look at the Indian system where they have this horizontal string of numbers thrown out, you add them all up, and if they come out to even number, then you divide it up evenly, and you can say that it's 25,004 fours, okay? Or if it's uneven, you can say it's 5,004 fours, 2,003 fours, 1,001 fours. You say, but still all measuring. Proportion deals with long and short relationship,
and you get rid of the fixity too.
Yeah, you get rid of it, the fixed quality of it is that it's either long or it's either short. And it alternates between those. Long, 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 short, or short, long, short, 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 long, short, long, short, long. That's not going to come up. You can't even count that up in terms of these markers I'm talking about metrically, because the impetus, just like the idea of feeling, it's been pulled away from the metrics. And there are only 2 kinds of rhythm. Those are metrical rhythms and those which are based off of proportion. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I might have to disagree with you. I like the fixed beat, but maybe that's just me.
Well, liking is overrated. You see, liking is based off.
I need some
liking is based off a lot of expectation and stuff like that. But you know, you can like stuff, but when the lights go out, dislike it. Okay.
Hey, so this is a good segue to move into something that I forgot to mention earlier, which is you have your own language for doing musical notation. Would you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called Ankh-Rasmation.
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 So like Ankh-Rasmation.
Yes.
Got you.
And Ankh, of course, is the Egyptian cross, which means vital life force, basically. Because when you look at the temple drawings, they pointed towards the head. They pointed towards the mouth and nose because that's the breath. They pointed towards the neck and the chest, and sometimes they pointed over top of the head. Okay, so Ankh means vital life force, and it's a cross that's like that. Okay, Ras come from the Amharic, which is the ancient Egyptian language. Ethiopian language. It may even come from Ge'ez, but we have it rendered in Amharic, and Ras means head, which infers the father, because we're talking about a family unit. And Mars is the mother sign. So if you look at Ankh-Rasmation, it means the vital life force of mother and father, which is the total gamut in which reproduction and creativity is taking place through. So it's not named after some musical thing. It's named after the actual source of regeneration that takes place between the idea of mother and father. You see, so when you look at that, it's a symbolic language, and by symbolic meaning that it has figures or symbols. It has color. Everything that's connected with it has to be referenced or put in place by the person that's making the observation of the score. And it's a score that's also based off of the notion of regeneration. The velocity units, which deals with stuff that has a lot of activity in it, has 4 different density levels, that is levels of thickness and etc. That's on the fast side. On the slow side, it has 4 levels of lessening of density. It begins to, from 1 to 4, the density level began to decrease. And so there's again this idea of the right and left, long and short. And in the rhythm units, there are 6 sets of those, actually 7, but I only use 6 nowadays. They also have this notion of long, short, long, short, long, short, based off of 6 sets. Okay. The point I'm trying to make is that the language was discovered in 1967 on a Saturday morning, and it's still growing in 2022. Okay. Because, as I was saying, that when you really get deep into language, and particularly symbolic language, every object that we see around us, inside or outside a building, all of that is language. All of it. And all of it came from inspiration. You see, that camera wasn't constructed by some person that wanted to construct something because they had an idea. No, they were inspired to look for how to do that.
So 2 more questions then.
Yeah.
So the first one is, you've lived in a number of places, but New Haven is home. Is there something about New Haven that charms you? Like, is there something special about New Haven that really attracts you to it?
Well, there is, but it'll take me a long time to explain.
Just give a little bit.
No, I'm gonna give you a little bit, but I'm saying that there are other things that attract me. But the most important one is my family. They live here in the New Haven area, which, as we know, is a fairly large area. It's got Hamden and North Haven and 1,000 other havens, you know. Essentially, it's a small town. I like small towns. That's about the core of it.
Ah, good. And then lastly, so, I mean, obviously very prolific. What's next?
Everything.
Anything more specific than everything?
Well, I'm about to, hopefully, by the middle of by summertime, conclude a work that has 26 compositions in it. That I've been working on for the last 50 years. It's 10 hours and a half of actual music time. Needs to be played over 4 days. That's one of 4 or 5 different projects I'm working on right now. So that's what I mean by everything.
Hey, well, Wadada, again, one more time, it's truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.